My name is Zenzele Chulu. I was born in 1967 in Chipata, Zambia. And I grew up in the village, in the small town settlements, and then also Lusaka as my other influences that came into me. So I've got both worlds, from the bush side in the village and also in the urban area. I did the art teacher's diploma at Evelyn College, and when I went through the courses, we learned almost every practice that was offered to us. There was printmaking, there was the design, graphics, painting, sculpture, as well as photography itself, including the techniques, the processes of producing those light-sensitive images, the darkroom techniques and stuff like that. So we did all that, and by then there was no digital photography. It has not come into the common domain. But later on, I think after college, I went for documentation project with the Zambian National Visual Arts Council, VAC, when I quit teaching, because I used to teach art at school. And the documentation project introduced me to another phase of photography. We had a photographer in our team. Me, I was a research assistant, together with Geoffrey and other members. So I used to observe the way he used to photograph artifacts and artworks and other objects. And sometimes I would play as an assistant to his photography, whatever, carry the cameras, and sometimes even help him to even photograph some of the stuff. So he would teach me along the way how to, compose a picture or a scene, or how to zero into particular. I think I owe it so much to Leonard Msabula, because it was more like very, very personal kind of teaching, So I got so much interested in that, even myself. Actually, I was the one now who ended up photographing the photographer, because he also wanted to be appearing in the, when we finished our documentation project, he just didn't want to be the man behind the camera. He also wanted to be seen that he was actually photographing. So I became now the photographer of the photographer. I'm a painter. That's my main practice in the arts, and I've done quite a lot of paintings. And within the painting category, I can subdivide it into also some other groups. I do landscape painting. I love the drama in the sky, the skyscapes. There's so much. I've done quite a number of studies just to study the clouds, the makeup of the horizon and the fauna. Then I've also done Pan-African, like more of a self-taught study. I've done research on Pan-African subjects to do with the African history, the civilizations that were there before, maybe say slavery, before colonialism. I was trying to explore in that direction, and just to pick out something that I thought was positive for my motivation to carry on looking at the progressive side, the positive side about African history, African civilization, African story. During the documentation project, I discovered one area which really, maybe somehow it was waiting for my action. The rock art. I got so much interested into rock art. And it's another area of my practice which I ventured into later on, maybe after the documentation project finished. I started trying to highlight, to bring out the awareness of rock art, the plight of those sites which are found across the country. I felt I had a duty as a painter, as an artist, to tell the story about these rock sites, maybe which have been long forgotten by the public. Maybe they didn't know about them, or people are not interested, or even some institutions like the National Heritage, the museums, they're not talking so much about it, So I just didn't know later on that I became the voice, to campaign for preservation of these sites. And then many people started making me as a reference point of rock art. You ask Zenzele about rock art, he will tell you something, so it became more associated with me, and I called them schematic tantrums, because schematic coming from those simple engravings and drawings that you find in the rock sites, but the tantrum part of it was more like to do with my passion of throwing my energy on canvas, not at yelling at somebody, but throwing my expression on canvas and reaching out to people, at home and abroad. And quite a number of people came across it from, I think there was a time I came to London for an art conference, and then I mentioned something to do with the rock art on BBC World Service. Then they featured me, and then I think they featured the program when I had come back to Zambia, and then I got so many phone calls on that day because so many people were listening. So they said, no, we heard about you on BBC, you're talking about the rock art, and that was nice. And so it put me in a different perspective as a painter. So I started pursuing, and then there was also another, a documentalist, would say a Cape Town based documentalist. He's a freelance journalist. He came all the way from Cape Town to run some documentary about me doing the rock art. So we did a mini expedition to one of the sites in Eastern Province, which I partly sponsored, and he also put in some money. And then it came out also on I think Press TV, and then also on China Central. I think there's some YouTube references to that. The Kalingalinga project, for me, the first time I just came across the name Stories of Kalingalinga, I already knew what I was going to be interested in. And I looked at my area mostly in terms of transport. I tried to focus on the transport. The reason also is that I was looking at how transport was being affected by the new construction and stuff like that, and then how people were getting by to do certain things, trading. Kalingalinga is quite an industrious, residential. It's not just the place where people stay, but I think there's a lot of economic activities. If you want your gates, in Zambia or in Lusaka in particular, there are two places. One is Kalingalinga, and then the other one is Garden Compound. Of course, there are also other places, but Kalingalinga comes out because this is what they have projected to be doing. So I try to look at the transport in the way that it affected them in more, I don't know, it's a positive way or a negative way. So much communication has been improved there are now tarmac roads in Kalingalinga, as opposed to where some time back. They've got some main roads. Of course, some are still in the same way they were. But I think by making those tarmacs inside Kalingalinga, I think it brought in also some improvement in terms of the structures that were happening, and then even the concentration of trade was also very much along those tarmac roads because of easy access. Yeah. So, like in this particular project, I was so much fascinated by Mr. Banda, who has been there for about 20 years. He sells charcoal at the ground area, which is along one of the main roads. And then I interviewed him about the wheelbarrows, which I was so much interested in. I said, I'm not interested in the human side of the story, but I wanted to tell me about the wheelbarrows. So they run some kind of a cooperative trading in charcoal. So it's not just one person. There are about, I think, 4 people who are trading there. They all have their own heaps of charcoal, but they use 2 wheelbarrows, and those are eligible for all the people that are working in that space. They can use those 2 wheelbarrows. So it's more of a collective thing, which I liked so much. And by the time that I was photographing, I think the wheelbarrows were just stationary. They were not busy. But he told me that if you want to capture the wheelbarrows in action, you have to come very early in the morning. Yeah, of which somehow it could not work out because of where I stay. Yeah, and then I was also interested in just general, transportation. Some other images would show some abandoned cars, but they're not really like forgotten, because in one of the shots which I used my phone, although it didn't come out very clear, but you could see an old car which had no wheels. It was just resting on some blocks. Yeah, but this car was even much older, like the one that Margaret was using for that model. Yeah, but this one was moving. So they don't just abandon them, but at some point they still revive them. Yes. So I was so fascinated by this train, and then quite a number of motorbikes and bicycles, which they use as mode of transport within Kalingalinga space. I found that also quite fascinating. And then the minibuses, with the commotion that they create sometimes, but they also penetrate inside Kalingalinga to pluck out their customers, their passengers. It's more like a persuasive business. They have to maybe make sure that you get into the bus. If you look smart or you're well dressed, it will entice you to get in the bus. For them, it's just the money that they're after. So I found that also very fascinating, that is happening there. And the trucks will be there to deliver sand, or maybe pick up people that have sold their properties. So you have all these dynamics. And then also visitors, not just Kalingalinga people. There are also people who use Kalingalinga as a shortcut, so it's that kind of an area where it might get influences from also other different parts. And then also some successful people that also go, maybe they've got relatives, they will park their nice posh cars nearby, so they'll be visiting there. Or some drivers stay in Kalingalinga, they work for big institutions, so they'll bring in their cars to show off, in Kalingalinga, Yeah, and then some foreigners also who have invested business in Kalingalinga, so they'll bring in these very posh cars. So it's that kind of an area that it will surprise you with the type of mode of transport, the levels, different levels. So you have the residents, they've got their own type of cars maybe, and even visitors who come there, and those who do the business, and those who go to buy things in Kalingalinga. Yeah. That's a package.